West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
Glenn, we had a big day here. Republicans held yet another hearing to try and shoehorn the weaponization of government narrative into the political ecosystem. But you actually appeared at this hearing this morning, and you and Democrats had what I think is a pretty brilliant strategy while you were handed a platform by Republicans who are in the majority to actually exploit an opening here. So talk about what you did.
Yeah, so surprisingly, I was invited to appear before Congress, specifically before Chairman Jim Jordan's subcommittee on the weaponization of government. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, it wasn't Chairman Jordan who invited me. It was the ranking Democrat member, Representative Stacey Plaskett. Now, because it is the Republicans in control of the House, the Republicans got to call 3 witnesses. The Dems got to call 1, just me. And the 3 witnesses were talking about, whistleblowers and how the FBI was running roughshod over whistleblowers who were, exposing how the FBI was out to get Donald Trump, which of course is pure and utter nonsense. But that was sort of the topic of the day. But I was asked to talk about the weaponization of government that is... But I was asked to talk about, not whistleblowers, but Project 2025, which is Donald Trump and the Republicans' blueprint for autocracy, 900-plus page tome that talks about how they can basically disassemble government. My piece of the testimony involved how they were going to disassemble the Department of Justice. And here is the plan in a nutshell. People may have heard of this thing called Schedule F. Well, Schedule F is basically Project 2025's plan to get rid of thousands and thousands of civil servants and public servants, apolitical government employees like myself. For 3 decades, we weren't political appointees. We were there, we didn't care one whit about politics. We were there to do the business of the American people. We are America's law firm, the prosecutors at the Department of Justice. Well, what Project 2025 wants to do is kind of get rid of thousands of those, good career civil servants who do everything apolitically and put in a whole bunch of Donald Trump appointees, loyalists, lapdogs, sycophants, so that they can pledge their loyalty to Donald Trump, not the Constitution, and they can do Donald Trump's dirty, corrupt, and indeed criminal bidding. So in a very real sense, Project 2025 proposes to consolidate all of the powers of the Department of Justice in Donald Trump and make him investigator, prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner. What could possibly go wrong, right? So I got to talk about that, what Project 2025 really means. And what it means is the rule of law will no longer be applied without fear or favor. It will be applied according to Donald Trump's whims. It will be used to reward his loyalists, his allies, and his criminal associates, and it will be used to punish his perceived enemies. That is Project 2025.
There was something so striking about your opening statement where I think you explained it so concisely and perfectly, basically, where you explained what the difference would look like, for example, if when we inevitably get these claims of fraud, if Donald Trump is in office. Can you explain real quick what it would look like, for example, if there was fraud that benefited Donald Trump versus fraud that disadvantaged Donald Trump?
Yeah, and I talked about that, Brian, against the backdrop of the preview that we've had of how Donald Trump will abuse and has abused the power of government and the power of the Department of Justice. Remember when all of his government officials were telling him that there was no systemic fraud undermining the results of the 2020 election?
Bill Barr called it bullshit. Bill Barr himself said it was bullshit.
Exactly. And what did Donald Trump say? I don't care. It doesn't matter that there was no fraud. Just say there was and leave the rest to me and my Republican allies in Congress. And Brian, that is a quote from a Donald Trump DOJ official who provided that testimony. Okay, against that backdrop, what would a Donald Trump-centric Department of Justice look like under Project 2025? Well, with all of his loyalists, lapdogs, flunkies, and sycophants in place, let's talk about the midterm elections, the first midterm elections after he gets elected, which he won't, but indulge me the hypothetical. So let's assume that there are reports of potential voter fraud in the 2026 midterm elections. Donald Trump's flunkies at the Department of Justice would basically ask one question when they were deciding what to do with those reports of potential voter fraud. Does the voter fraud help Republicans or does it hurt Republicans? If it helps Republicans, we will not investigate it. They'll just say, well, insufficient evidence. They'll push it aside. Why? Because the fraud helps Republicans and by extension helps Donald Trump. What about if the alleged fraud hurts Republicans? Then they're going to go after it with both guns drawn, regardless of whether there's enough evidence to investigate it or not. This is not the equal application of the law. This is autocracy.
Right, perfectly put. Glenn, I live streamed the whole thing. And by the way, for those who want to watch the hearing, I'll embed the link right here on the screen. I'll also post it in the post description of this video. But what I noticed was that Republicans largely avoided talking to you and instead focused solely on the three witnesses that they themselves invited. Why do you think that was?
Well, I was surprised. I was waiting for Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz and these other characters to start yelling at me. And
people who talk a big game, right?
Yeah, calling me names and disagreeing. How about pushing back? Because if people watch my 5-minute opening statement, I went after Donald Trump and Project 2025 about as hard as I could. I crammed everything in that I could in 5 minutes to highlight the danger to democracy that is Project 2025. And then I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. And I get virtually no questions from the Republican members of Congress. Now, in fairness, it is a Republican-controlled House and committee. So they got 3 witnesses, and the Dems only got 1, me. So it's not surprising that most of the questions I got came from the Democrat members of the committee. But still, I thought the Republicans would want to push back a little bit on what I was saying about Trump and Project 2025. But, I think the reason, really, that they didn't ask me questions is not because they disagree with, the Donald Trump's blueprint for autocracy, Project 2025. I think it's because they know that Project 2025 is polling so low in the court of public opinion. I mean, it's polling lower than whale shit, okay? Excuse me, but that's just how low it's polling. And so I think it was a political calculation. They were afraid to touch it for fear of political blowback, so they wouldn't ask me anything. But listen, bravery, thy name is not the Republican Party.
Right. By the way, the actual number of how popular Project 2025 is, according to a new NBC poll? 4%. I would imagine hemorrhoids would poll higher than 4% in this country. 4%. So to your exact point, that is why they avoided talking to you. It's because they know that their own agenda, their own professed agenda, written by people, 200 of which were in Donald Trump's own first administration, is that toxic that, they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. They're happy to enact it if they're able to consolidate power for themselves, but God forbid they actually acknowledge that they're backing any of the policies that are written for them to enact. And let's finish off with this. I should note that Jim Jordan actually did question you just for but a fleeting moment at the very end of the hearing with just some leading questions. What did you make of the fact that the only time a Republican deigned to address you was just some quick, pointless questions to confirm his prior beliefs?
Maybe unsurprising, but a little disappointing. I'm a fighter. I'm a gutter kid from Jersey. I played football, I wrestled, I boxed, I served in the Army, I prosecuted homicide cases and RICO cases. I don't mind mixing it up. And I was kind of ready for the challenge of the Jim Jordans and the Matt Gaetz, but they opted really not to ask me anything. And it was funny, at the tail end, after a 2.5-hour hearing, all of the other members of the committee were gone, and it was just Jim Jordan wrapping up. And he's like, Mr. Kirsch, let me ask you a couple questions. And he, kind of yammered out a couple of questions that were leading questions, and I answered them honestly and in a straightforward way. And I almost was inclined to say, is that really all you've got for me? But the answer is, yeah, that's really all he had.
Right. I mean, look, we already know that Republicans love to stay in their cocoon. It is why they don't come on any other media other than right-wing media. This is their Fox News Newsmax approach, and they just want to talk amongst themselves in their hermetically sealed bubble to continue to perpetuate lies and disinformation to the American people, knowing full well that they won't get any pushback. And if they dared speak to you and risk having you, just acknowledge objective reality and poke a hole in one of these lies, then I think that wouldn't have served them very well. So it's certainly not exactly the most brave approach you could have taken. But Glenn, as for you, thank you for the work that you did on that committee. A lot of people watched that live stream along with me this morning, and glad that we have you speaking on our behalf here.
It is Thursday, the 26th of September of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And we will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya. A little bit of spice in your life. And Eric Adams got a little bit of spicy last night, didn't he? Huh? Well, you F around, you're going to find out, huh? Well, that's exactly what it is. And like any true autocrat, I don't know, maybe every crook is innocent until proven guilty. And that's how it should be, okay? But I liked it when our crooks were a little more contrite. It's this thumbing your nose at the system and saying everything's fake. I think especially, when the shit's coming down, you might be a little contrite, but that's just me. That's fine. Eric Adams has a long history of other people in similar circumstances, even recently on a federal, national, dare I say international level. Steal nuke documents, squirrel them away in your rat-infested golf resort. Is that yeah, it's a golf resort of sorts, isn't it, Mar-a-Lago? Nah, maybe it's just a residence. All right, not supposed to be, but it is. Well, right there where they they flood the basement to hide evidence on purpose. It's on tape. Right there in the security video stuff. Oops, didn't destroy that, did you? All right. Well, like I said, Eric Adams has so many examples to draw from on how to attend to this problem that he finds himself in right now. All right. Right down to the lawyer saying these FBI agents went rogue. No, they didn't. A judge had to sign off on this, meaning that there had been a lot of evidence gathered before they went after somebody like the mayor of New York. Okay? Come on. Well, it couldn't have happened to a worse person, but I don't know, maybe it could. We're finding out. Yeah. Well, what else is happening? You know, as we get closer to this election, I cannot believe, apparently, now just bear with me, okay? Donald Trump is like hoarding money and not kicking it down to the local level. And yet, somehow, and maybe this is part of the plan, knowing that your cult members are so cultic that on their own, they're going to make sure that signage is everywhere. And they're doing it apparently on their own dime, which is, I guess, you know, direct democracy. Don't say democracy, we'll have to say republic. Direct republic. They hate anything that has to do with dem. It triggers them. Really weird. We're not a representative democracy. We're a republic. Well, you know what? A republic is a democracy, so shut up. Jesus. Idiots. Okay. So, as we get closer to the election, and it looks really bad for their guy, and they know it. They are so scared. Yeah, well, they're getting also more crazy. The bling that these people are doing is just, I gotta say, it's unseemly. It really is. I mean, come on. Nobody did this for FDR, okay? Come on. And dare I say, they really didn't do it for Ronnie Reagan either. Why this guy? I don't get it. I mean, this guy was like a freaking clown back in the day. I'm a playboy, and I'm like partying at Studio 54, and I'm like building stuff, and he never built anything. I'm a spoiled rich boy. My daddy's rich. I got a bunch of money. Look how much money I got. I'm a billionaire. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Ask John Barron. What a freak. I mean, people knew about this guy's shtick way back then. And I don't buy this BS that, oh, well, middle America never heard of him. Give me a break. People were glued to their TVs watching the lifestyles of the rich and famous, thinking maybe I could be like that, and the only way to be like that is to be an absolute dick. Look at Donald Trump. He's a dick. Gotta be like that or we can't be rich. And the gospel told me so. You would expect the prosperity gospel to arise out of, well, you know, strip mall parishes. You got to get from the strip mall to the glass cathedral somehow. Well, there is a drive-in in between. Let's not forget that. And those of you who know Schiller know where I am coming from. Yes, you do. And what's up with this deal with, the model MAGA? Used car salesman, then a cop, then you're in politics. That's my brother. What the hell? Well, if you can't get into politics, then I guess you get into Hollywood. Okay. Man. I still, at this point in my life, think about what my life could have been if I had actually accepted that production gig on The Gong Show. How different everything would have been. Jesus. You know what. I think that I foresaw a life of The Day of the Locusts, and if you've ever read that novel, you should. Nathaniel West. Oh my God. Ugh. Yeah, Day of the Locust. That was a frightening novel for a kid to read. But I liked it anyway, and it warded me off of a life of, I don't know, Hollywood servitude to a false idol. What is that false idol? Your own ego is what it is, no matter where you are. You're an armory person? Total ego got you there. And total ego can also put you in jail if someone dies on your watch. That happens a lot too. So there you go. All right, well, I think that actually life fared pretty well not going on or not being on the production staff of The Gong Show. But on the other hand, it could have led me to, I don't know, 60 Minutes. I could have turned some dials there. Could have. I don't know what we're talking about is getting towards Friday, and as if there's not enough news in the world, why don't we give you a rundown of what we have actually in store for you in this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And as you know, the Speakeasy is right beyond where the chef's table is. All right. You are now in the Bistro Cafe because that's the front. To keep, I don't know, the outside world oblivious to where, the real stuff is happening. What that stuff is, well, we have to move our way to the chef's table to find out, won't we? Okay. Well, at the top, I did like that Kirshner breaking down how he and the Democratic members on the committee outsmarted the Republicans' weaponization of government. My God. They take what they do and they put it onto their opponent. It's an old Goebbels trick. That's why we call them MAGA Nazis. Okay? If a goose steps like a Nazi, it stiff-arm salutes like a Nazi. Well, it's a Nazi. On the rest of the menu, the FBI's raid on leading Department of Defense IT vendor Carasoft comes amid allegations of price fixing with SAP and Accenture. Oh boy. For Biden Department of Justice, it sure seems like that Department of Justice is independent and doing their job as the Department of Justice of the United States is supposed to do. Moving on. The Kamala Harris campaign has beckoned enigmatic Bay Area billionaire Laurene Powell Jobs out of the shadows. And yes, that Jobs. And Anna Wolf won a Pulitzer for the Favre welfare scandal story. Now she could face jail time for it. No good deed goes unpunished. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where MAGA Mike Johnson demanded Zelensky remove Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. after the Ukraine president's visit to a Pennsylvania munitions factory. Well, when you're bought off by Vlad, that would be bothersome to you, wouldn't it? And the EU Judicial Cooperation Agency is stepping up its fight against organized crime. Does that include organized criminal states like Vladistan? We'll see. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Netroots Radio on the social medias at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on the social medias at Justice Putnam. I take care of it mostly. And if you do, you'll have quick access to the show notes and links diaries that get posted 10 minutes before showtime. So that you have quick access to the show notes and links diaries, in which then you can read the actual reportage by the actual reporters in its entirety as they meant it originally. Yeah, originally meant it. Okay, I'll get it out. Alrighty, let us tuck into this first offering, which I have not opened up yet because don't ask me why. I'm behind, okay? And it is by, let me scroll down here because it bounces a little bit. Okay. David DiMolfetta from cybersecurity reporter at NextGov FCW. All right, NextGov. They are, actually, yes, they deal with IT and data type issues in their capacity as journalists. That's what they do. The FBI and Defense Criminal Investigative Services launched a joint raid at Carasoft's Reston, Virginia headquarters. Law enforcement officials confirmed the raid, but have yet to share details on what prompted the seizure of company records. And this is up to last night. They still have not updated this. We can confirm that DCIS executed a joint search warrant operation with the FBI in Northern Virginia on Tuesday morning. We have nothing further to add as this is an open investigation. A spokesperson for the Defense Department's Audit Service or Office said in a statement just last night, which was Wednesday night. Richard Conway, an attorney for Carasoft, did not return a request for comment. Is it Carasoft or Carasoft? I like Carasoft. A company spokesperson also did not comment on the new details of the raid because silence is golden. News of the raid prompted speculation about possible, but thus far unsubstantiated links to an ongoing court case that was filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland last year and involved efforts to defraud government agencies. I should add that this particular media page, organ here, journalistic group, and NextGov is partially funded by Carasoft. I'm just saying. And they put that out there right up at the top. But I see where an editor has, shall we say, cleaned up the copy a little bit. Just saying, okay? The names of the vendors allegedly involved, well, they're not alleged because they're already under indictment. So let's go on. I always hate this journalistic school quibbling. Let's say alleged. That way we're like, middle of the road. Well, the vendors involved in the scheme were redacted. Okay. A report in Bloomberg citing an unredacted filing named SAP and noted that prosecutors were also examining other resellers and a unit of Accenture. Both companies issued statements to NextGov indicating they were cooperating with the U.S. Department of Justice in a civil investigation. Carasoft employees were told Tuesday the raid was part of an investigation into a company with which Carasoft had done business in the past, and that the company is fully cooperating and operating business as usual, according to an email sent by Carasoft President Greg Abode and obtained by NextGov FCW. Carasoft is a leading IT vendor and a reseller of technology products and services to public sector organizations, with prime spots on key federal government-wide acquisition contracts such as NASA's Solutions for Enterprise-Wide Procurement and the General Services Administration's multiple award schedule. The raid occurred during the busiest time of the year for federal contractors. The U.S. government's fiscal year ends on September 30th, where agencies have to finalize budgets, allocate remaining funds, and push through last-minute contracts before the deadline. A Carasoft employee, speaking on condition that no one divulges who they are for, what? Fear of retaliation, said that account represents handling client relationships were directed by team leads to calm down vendors and assure them there was nothing to fear. They're not coming after you. Don't worry, only us. Documents filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland last year indicate that the U.S. is looking into whether Carasoft conspired with other companies to rig bids, inflate prices, overcharge, and defraud the Department of Justice, among other federal government agencies, when it resold the products. The specific companies in question were redacted in the documents that NextGov had retrieved. For a year, Carasoft had not produced the full set of transaction records, including but not limited to the communications, solicitations, proposals, quotes, bids, award notices, orders, purchase orders, and invoices for even a single project for the Justice Department and others involved. 4 months, frustration had mounted among DOJ lawyers who claimed in court proceedings that the government's document requests and inquiries appeared to be delayed or unfulfilled by Carasoft. I wonder where they got that idea. And when I say they, where did Carasoft get the idea that they could just squirrel away this stuff and ignore what the DOJ has demanded? Makes the mind reel. Well, Carasoft had paid a $75 million fine to the government in 2015 to settle claims that the company and partner firm VMware overcharged the government and concealed commercial pricing arrangements. Carasoft did not admit wrongdoing in the settlement. Alec Regimbal at the SF Gate, part of the San Francisco Chronicle Group, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Vice President Kamala Harris's meteoric rise to the top of the Democratic Party has brought one of Silicon Valley's most enigmatic billionaires out of the shadows, so much so that insiders believe she may land a gig in the Harris administration should Harris triumph in November. In an article that was published on Tuesday, the New York Times explored the decades-long friendship between Harris and Laurene Powell Jobs, the widow of Apple co-founder Steve Jobs. The article paid particular attention to how Powell Jobs, long active in Democratic politics, has taken a more active role in the presidential race since President Joe Biden dropped out in July. Sources who spoke to the Times said Powell Jobs was not initially paying much attention to Biden's re-election campaign. According to the story, she bristled at some Biden policy positions that she considers anti-tech, but sources said she has since become energized by Harris's whirlwind takeover of the Democratic Party. Those sources said Powell Jobs even played a role in the pressure campaign that ultimately forced Biden out of the race. Well, I don't know. Is that a good or a bad thing? Well, we'll see. After Biden's catastrophic performance, Alec. Okay, we'll go with it since you put it there, Alec. Well, in that June 27th debate with Trump Democrats began to worry that the 81-year-old president was the wrong person to continue as the party's nominee in November because media immediately pounced. I'm just saying. But we still have the best of all possible worlds. In fact, I would say even better. Well, soon after the Times reports, a Powell Jobs aide began circulating grim focus group and polling data that influenced other major liberal donors to mobilize against Biden. Once Biden did withdraw, the Times reported that Powell Jobs joined Harris' campaign calls and encouraged other women tech leaders to publicly support Harris. The outlet also said she's been promoting a list of 17 pro-Harris political action committees to follow Democratic donors for contributions. Sources who spoke to the Times said it would be unsurprising if Powell Jobs' behind-the-scenes stumping for Harris ultimately led to a cabinet position in the Harris administration. Which position? Friends of Powell Jobs said she might be a good fit for U.S. Secretary of Education, which suddenly Donald Trump wants to get rid of. Weird, huh? And friends, and let's see. Oh, yeah, and noting that education is one of her top issues, as well it should be. The outlet also highlighted the long personal friendship between the two women. Powell Jobs was reportedly one of the 60 people who attended Harris's wedding in 2014, and Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, attended the wedding of Powell Jobs' son, Reed. They share the same dermatologist, taking personal trips together, and often going out of their way to have one-on-one dinners, including at Quince in San Francisco, when they're in the same city, the article said. Powell Jobs donated $500 to Harris's first serious political race for San Francisco district attorney, and the article said Powell Jobs was at Harris's swearing-in ceremony after she won the race to become California's attorney general in 2010. She also attended Harris's swearing-in ceremony after she was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2017. Well, brought her out of the shadows, and it's a good thing because she is a quiet but very powerful force. Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Mark Fanerawada from the ESPN website. A little more than a year ago, a young reporter named Anna Wolf was the talk of this town and of journalism for a series of stories that won her the coveted Pulitzer Prize. She was invited to an exclusive dinner at the Washington home of legendary reporter Bob Woodward. A handful of media suitors reached out to see if she was ready to ditch Jackson and move on to the big time. She had even been offered a free treatment to rid her yard of mosquitoes by a local pest service. Wolf, a reporter with Mississippi Today, a nonprofit online news outlet, won the Pulitzer for detailing a disturbing $77 million welfare fraud scandal in the nation's second poorest state, a scandal headlined by Mississippi's most famous athlete, Brett Favre. The reporting described how, with then-Governor Phil Bryant in office, Favre and a handful of others scored millions of dollars that were supposed to go to welfare families but were instead used on projects that included a college volleyball facility and a concussion drug company. Favre's involvement elevated the story into national news, providing fodder for talking heads from Fox News to ESPN. In no time, some people were going to sarcastic extremes over the story, such as shirts that went on sale saying in all capital letters, "Brett Favre stole money from poor people. Go Bears." Bryant and Favre both have said they have no idea the money was designated for welfare families, except it says it right there in the 10th. Jeez. Okay. It is against that backdrop last spring, a month shy of her 29th birthday, that Wolf won the Pulitzer and celebrated with family, friends, and colleagues at Hal and Mal's, a Jackson institution. It was a moment that should have capped the journey on a story Wolf had been chasing for 5 years. Instead, not long after the Pulitzers were announced, the former governor sued Mississippi Today for defamation, setting off a battle that not only soured Wolf's and Mississippi Today's moment, but more troubling to Wolf, turned the focus away from the scandal itself. That's because not only has Bryant's lawsuit not gone away, despite Mississippi Today's insistence that his reporting is truthful, the former governor also recently asked a circuit court to hold Wolf and the news organization in contempt of court. The governor wants all of Wolf's notes. He wants her emails. He wants her confidential sources. And the judge has ordered at the very least that Wolf and company show him what they've got so he can determine its relevance to the case. Well, Mississippi Today has called the order unconstitutional and appealed to the state Supreme Court. Either way, Wolf and her boss, Adam Goshanu, have said there's no way they're giving up confidential sources. They say they would rather defy the court and face possible jail, or probably more likely see their news organization get hammered with substantial damages. What was once a story about poverty, power, and Brett Favre has now become a battle involving the First Amendment, which I actually think it still involves poverty, power, Bryant, and Brett Favre. All right, let's get to our break, and do go to the show notes and links diary and read the rest of this article. This particular reporter has faced his own contempt charges for not giving up sources and faced jail time, so he knows a little bit about where he's coming from. And it really does look like it's a complete retaliation lawsuit, because the little paper that did, and no good deed goes unpunished, as we said at the top. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. GOP challenges to state laws allowing the counting of properly postmarked mail ballots after the election takes on more significance when considering chronic U.S. Postal Service delays. U.S. election officials are worried. Trump-appointed U.S. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy announced consolidation of another 30 central sorting facilities earlier this year, of an expected 150 such closings. DeJoy has since delayed the closings until January 2025, but in a joint letter September 17th, the National Association of Secretaries of State and the National Association of State Election Directors pointed out lapses in USPS delivery standards. Quote, in nearly every state, local election officials are receiving timely postmarked ballots well after Election Day and well outside the 3 to 5 business days USPS claims as the first-class delivery standard. Other problems cited included poor training and a perceived lack of action from USPS management. A Kansas election official quoted in The Guardian noted ballots delivered on time but without postmarks, invalidating them under Kansas law. To criticism that the USPS is unprepared for the election, DeJoy told a reporter they're wrong. Allowing 10 days for delivery and curing of any ballot problems will help make sure your vote counts. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Veal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1786. Daniel Shays led a group of farmers in an armed uprising. They were angry about taxes levied by the state of Massachusetts. Shays had been a captain in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. After the war, an economic downturn hit farmers hard. During the Revolutionary War, many Massachusetts residents had few assets other than their land. After the war, European businesses refused to extend lines of credit to businesses in Massachusetts. The Europeans insisted on payment of goods in hard cash. Massachusetts businesses, in turn, demanded that their own customers pay with hard cash. Rural farmers could not comply. Farmers began to lose their land when they could not meet their debt and tax obligations. To make matters worse, some soldiers were having a hard time collecting their pay for their military service. When the Massachusetts legislature adjourned without considering the many petitions from those seeking relief from the courts issuing foreclosures, many farmers had had enough. Daniel Shays and others began to organize protests against the harsh economic conditions. Daniel Shays and others ended up in court for non-payment of debts. That led Shays and the other farmers in the armed uprising. The rebels shut down the courts. In turn, the Massachusetts legislature passed harsh measures to try and quell the protests. They issued a resolution which allowed authorities to keep people in jail without a trial. Eventually, militia forces suppressed the 4,000 rebels. rebels. Some protesters were pardoned. A few escaped to nearby states, with 2 being sentenced to death by hanging. Daniel Shea hid in the Vermont woods until he was later pardoned. Even before the Industrial Revolution that gave rise to labor unions, agricultural workers faced many hardships. And this is another example of them banding together to fight for change.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. Because there's lots more of us where we come from, don't you know? Where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, expected to be a tad warmer today. Low to mid 80s, maybe a tad warmer than that. We'll see. Some clouds this morning will give way to generally sunny skies for the afternoon. Winds light and variable. Clear skies overnight with lows in the mid to low 50s. Winds remaining light and variable. And then mainly sunny skies tomorrow with highs in the mid to upper 80s. Winds light and variable. Looks like ragweed pollen is remaining high as the dominant pollen here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at a sweet 20 parts per million, which means people will burn trash, because when we have clean air, they have a right to dirty it. Damn them. And that daytime UV index remains at its fall moderate level at level 5. Looks like barometric pressure is falling at 30 inches. Visibility is only at 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 82%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. It is. London is 60 degrees with light rain, and they have a moderate warning for heavy rain. Moderate. Looks like Paris is 59 degrees with heavy rain and a moderate warning for thunderstorms. Rome is 78 and partly cloudy, and they don't have any warning for anything. Well, good for them. Looks like Kabul is 72 and clear. Hong Kong is 85 and clear. Tokyo is 75 and mostly cloudy. Auckland, New Zealand is 60 degrees and merely cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 and cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 70 degrees sunny with a gale warning. And New York is 69 degrees Fahrenheit with rain. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Mascaro at the Associated Press World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. House Speaker Mike Johnson is calling on Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to fire his country's ambassador to the U.S. as Republicans criticize Zelensky's visit to an ammunition plant in Pennsylvania, a swing state, as a political stunt. The Republican speaker's demand. And what was Bibi's address to only Republican members of Congress, pal? I'm just saying. The Republican speaker's demand yesterday, Wednesday, came as Zelensky addressed the United Nations in New York on the eve of his visit to Washington, where he plans to brief lawmakers on Capitol Hill about the war effort before meeting with President Joe Biden at the White House. The tour was clearly a partisan campaign event designed to help Democrats, and is clearly election interference, Johnson whined in a letter to Zelensky. I'm adding some editorial flavor, if you didn't know. Johnson, who was close to Trump, said no Republicans were invited to the plant tour on Sunday, which he said was arranged by Ambassador Oksana Markarova. An Army official said it was standard procedure to invite House and Senate members who represent the district where such industrial plants are located. The official who spoke that no one say who he was or whom they were to discuss internal discussions said in this case interested congressional members from the area attended. So in other words, they followed protocol. Joining for the visit were the state's governor, Senator Bob Casey, of course Josh Shapiro is the governor, and the district's representative Matt Cartwright, all Democrats. Well, I think the Republicans were too busy doing Vlad's bidding. If they showed up, that would have made Vlad mad. The speaker's stern demand for a swift removal of Markarova, a well-received diplomat in Washington, who has been a fixture on Capitol Hill since the outset of the war, even sitting as a guest in the House Visitors Gallery during pivotal speeches, comes at a daunting time for Ukraine as Zelensky works to ensure U.S. support for the war effort in an election year. I think that also because the munitions plant is located in Scranton, Biden's hometown, it's all too much for MAGA Mike. While Biden and Democrats in Congress have largely stood with Ukraine since the Russian invasion in 2022, sending billions in U.S. aid to buy weaponry and support services, Republicans have split deeply. Trump has turned the GOP toward a new America First movement that generally prefers to limit U.S. involvement overseas, and he often speaks admirably of Russia and its president, Vladimir Putin. Well, that's a nice way of saying that he's pretty much a traitor against the United States' interests, as well as, I suppose, those Republicans who have split. Johnson said that support for ending Russia's war against Ukraine continues to be bipartisan, but our relationship is unnecessarily tested, noting comments from the Ukrainian government about the top of the Trump-Vance presidential ticket. Associated Press World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Union's Judicial Cooperation Agency, Eurojust, launched a new network to strengthen and further coordinate the continent's fight against organized crime. The European Judicial organized crime network's first priority will be tackling drug-related crime. Drug trafficking cases at Eurojust have doubled since 2020. The organization said that in 2023 it worked on almost 2,500 cases that led to the seizure of drugs worth more than $28 billion U.S. Eurojust said in a statement that tackling crime gangs that generate an estimated 148 billion euros in dollars in illicit profits each year requires a transnational approach that is fast and flexible, that can adapt to an ever-changing criminal landscape. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. I was hoping they were going after Vlad, but you do know that even though we are ending our broadcast period for the day, Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Friday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.